Looking for an alternative place to find news and opinion? How about conversing with fellow patriots? Join us Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific for Cold War Radio. You will find it at www.spreaker.com or in the Spreaker app. Search for Cold War Radio and you will find it. Since I've been listening, I have met some terrific patriots and learned quite a lot about current events that the mainstream media will never tell you. Please come and join us. Be inspired. You will feel right at home in our Spreaker chat room.
Ladies and gentlemen, John O'Connor is an experienced trial lawyer practicing law in San Francisco since 1972. He has tried cases in state and federal court throughout the country, served as an assistant U.S. attorney in Northern California from 74 to 79, representing the United States in both criminal and civil cases. Among his interesting assignments have been representation of the government during the OPEC oil embargo of the 1970s. Boy, I remember that well. I was pumping gas at the time, writing Fifth Amendment and state of mind briefs for the prosecution in U.S. versus Patricia Hearst, representing the FDIC, FSLC, and RTC during the savings and loan crisis of the late 80s and early 90s, representing California Attorney General Dan Lundgren in campaign-related litigation, defending R.J. Reynolds Tobacco in significant smoking and health litigation, and my favorite, representing Coach Don Nelson in litigation with Dallas Mavericks owner and former Pittsburgh citizen Mark Cuban, and representing W. Mark Felt regarding the revelation of his identity as Deep Throat. Ladies and gentlemen, media analyst and author John O'Connor. I'm Hutch Bailey Jr. Welcome to Cold War Radio with my co-host, Ward Miller. Good evening, John.
Hutch and Ward, good to be with you.
I'll tell you, this is an interesting thing. This is something that you've really noticed that Trump is getting under the media's thin skin. But you have a new book out about how the Washington Post betrayed Deep Throat, covered up Watergate, and began today's really partisan advocacy journalism. You served, as I said, as an assistant U.S. attorney in Northern California, representing the United States in criminal and civil cases. This is a really interesting thing that you're coming out now, because you have talk about your book, Postgate. Talk about what's going on now.
Well, yeah, Hutch, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. I started writing this book before all the recent kerfuffle began about the obvious media bias here in the Trump administration. But I felt for a number of years that the media was just getting worse and worse, and always contrasted that with what I thought was the beauty and truth of the Watergate investigation led by my client, Mark Felt. And to a certain extent, that's right. He was a wonderful source. Woodward and Bernstein gleaned great stuff from Mark Felt during Watergate, and all seems happy and well. But what I've discovered is that really this was really just the start of today's biased media practice, so to speak. And,
let me try to put this in context for the audience. Mark Felt, correct me if I'm wrong, he was an FBI individual, right?
Right, and he was the famous Deep Throat.
Yeah, he wanted
the number 2 man in the FBI,
and wanted
and
wanted to be number one. And Richard Nixon didn't want him to be number one. If I'm correct in my studies on this issue, is that correct?
Right. That's right, Hutch. Although I think that's probably overplayed by analysts. He was happy to be where he was and head up the investigation, and he hoped that this new guy that Nixon appointed would be tough and not buckle under political pressure. But he did not do this out of resentment. He was concerned that the FBI's reputation would be shot if it appeared that they were politically going along with the White House. Doesn't this sound relevant to today?
It does, and that's my point. Yeah. I mean, this guy,
history repeats itself,
right? And my biggest problem with the whole thing, and I'd like to hear your, illustration of it, but to me, this was almost like the first. Well, no, let me not go there. Let me talk about Bernstein and Woodward first. I think these two guys have skated along for their entire lives. I mean, their entire careers were made like they were some kind of courageous investigative reporters when all they did, and I spoke about this on the show a couple nights ago, not even realizing that we were going to have you on here tonight. But to me, they got a softball pitched at them and took their whole careers. They didn't do any work. Didn't he contact them?
Well, yes and no, but let me tell you, Hutch, you're right on the nose here. You're hitting it right smack on the nose, because they not only had in their hip pocket the head of the entire investigation that saw the whole thing, that had the big picture, and that's Mark Felt, but they also had the advantage of some of the lower level agents who could direct them to who they were interviewing at the time. And so they sort of could tailgate on those individual interviews and follow up. The FBI would talk to a witness one day. They'd come the next day, and guess what? They'd get the exact same thing that the FBI got the day before, because the FBI had already been through it. They prepped them. They went through it. And so yeah.
So that was kind of basically like the precursor to the leaking.
But the real point of Watergate is, now, today, is that what we did was we incentivized this so-called investigative journalism. What does Woodward and Bernstein get out of this, as Hutch just said? They get a free ride. They get honors, they get fame, they get riches. Movies are made about them, and they're considered, along with other investigative journalists, to be kingmakers and king destroyers. So all of a sudden, the coolest people in the world are investigative journalists. And what do you have to do to get these riches, the fame, the rewards, the accolades, Pulitzer Prizes? You have to nail somebody, don't you? It's no good if you're an investigative reporter and you state both sides, and the populace is divided. They're discussing this thing rationally as to whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. So that's what we have created through Watergate. And as I talk about in this book, I always thought that the stuff they were printing was very fair and accurate, and to a great degree it was. But what I found out was that they were concealing massive amounts of very pertinent things that would have been very much mitigating and not exculpating so much as extenuating and mitigating circumstances for President Nixon that he could have used in trying to fight off impeachment. Remember this, impeachment's a political death penalty. When you get set up for a death penalty, it's nice if you can tell the judge all the good things you've done in life and how you've gotten screwed in this particular situation. Nixon was never given that because the Washington Post did not report everything.
That's a shame too. It really is, John. I mean, you look at what happened this last couple days with Brett Kavanaugh, and it's the same thing with the New York Times. I mean, it's exactly the same thing. They leave out, the fact that the accuser doesn't remember what happened. And but you add, and ladies and gentlemen, cover your ears because I'm going to say this. You add the word penis, and all of a sudden, 6 Democrat primary challengers want to impeach a Supreme Court justice. And I know what that's about. That is about rendering his vote on any subject, and their primary subject is going to be abortion, Roe versus Wade, as being null and void because he did that in college, which he never did, but the New York Times said he did it, and they went flying with it. It's the same thing. You're doing hero's work, sir. This is something that we have to fix.
Well, I think it is. It's really destroying our democracy. If you think about it, if you just look at the masthead of the Washington Post, they say something that's very pertinent. Democracy dies in darkness. They say that, and yet what is happening today? Do we really get a true story out of these publications and out of certain cable news shows? No, we do not.
I guess my question would be, at what point is somebody going to actually hold him to task? You know, with the smears that they did to Justice Kavanaugh, why doesn't he, stand up and just go, hey, you know what? I'm going to file a lawsuit for defamation, and I'm going to own the New York Times. Because he can. Because, I mean, they've already come out and said, well, we reprinted things that aren't true at all.
But if we did that, it wouldn't solve the problem, and then the New York Times would then write a book about how noble they were in facing up to these conservatives that were trying to abridge their free speech rights. They'd be victims. They're already complaining now about, how can President Trump say anything about us? This is so terrible. I think we need a broader fix here. We need in unison. And one of the reasons I think I wanted in the last couple of years, I pushed to get this book out, was that I think we need in unison to say, look, if you can get rid of a duly elected president that carried 48 states, if you can get rid of him through biased reporting, it almost happened just in the last couple of years, then what is up with our democracy? We have to speak in a loud and unified voice that we won't stand for this anymore. Now, exactly what pressure we can apply to the media and to the, I think the businesses that advertise and so forth. I'm not suggesting a boycott, but I'm suggesting a societal statement that we won't stand for this stuff, and anybody who encourages it should not have our goodwill. Let's put it that way.
But
Nobody
John,
should have our goodwill.
But John, I mean, we can say that all day long. But if you understand the media as we do, and that's why we're capturing just hordes of people that are tired of the fake news media, if you will. If you don't bring financial pain on these there's only 6 corporations that control the entire media, 99% of the media in the United States and the world even. When CNN and MSNBC can bolster their bank accounts with mindless movies and shows and things that people that aren't political are watching, that they can afford to take the loss on their fake news programs, we got a problem, Houston.
Well, I don't think they can afford that. I think if people rise up and apply pressures on the businesses that support these outfits, if their ratings go down, I think they will feel it in the pocketbook. That's a big moneymaker. These stations make a lot of money from the eyeballs that are watching, and as soon as there's enough pressure, the recent polls that have come out have shown that the people are getting increasingly sick and tired of media bias. And I think the more we discuss it, we point it out, we don't let them move off the subject to the next subject in our, shortened attention span culture. If we just stick with this and say, look what you guys have done, shame on you. And that's what this is about. My idea here is not to embarrass Woodward or Bernstein. It's the Post and the rest of the media as institutions. That's what we really have to look at.
So that
not any one particular reporter.
It doesn't bother you that Woodward has been coming out for the last 30, because I'm 58 years old. I've been engaged for a long time. And, to see, I know you're before me, but I'm just saying, to see Woodward still to this day, with his Thurston Howell accent, coming out like he's the best reporter there ever was, that doesn't give you pause at all. That man, that ticks me off more than most things do.
Well, you know what my thought is on that? My thought is that if Woodward were working for a paper that wanted him to report the whole truth, he would have done it. I do not blame him. He was a private. He was a flatfoot at the time, and then he gets all these accolades. And what do you expect him to do? Give back his millions of bucks and say,
no.
Robert Redford, I don't really look like Robert Redford. No, he's not going to say that. It's human nature. I wouldn't do it if I were he either. So I think the real remedy is, and the real shameful institutions are the people that are running these shows and running these papers. And
I agree.
I think it would be almost wrong if we took it out on Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward, no matter what we think of them. And I actually personally like Woodward quite a bit. I mean,
what happened to Bernstein? What happened to Bernstein? Is he still around, or?
Well, he's still around, but he hadn't done much. He's kind of gone to lunch on this. To Woodward's credit, Woodward works hard. I don't know what Carl Bernstein does, but he's out there, and he like Carl Bernstein said something pretty funny about him. He said, Woodward's the kind of guy that does his homework before it's assigned, which I think is pretty funny. But that's why I'm saying, Hutch, that I think we ought to really talk about the institutions that are putting out this tremendously partisan advocacy journalism with impunity. See, that's what Watergate did. It wasn't until Watergate finally broke the dam that people said, hey, we can get away with this. It works. All we have to do is just put stuff out there, like this Brett Kavanaugh story, and there's no repercussions for it. There's no repercussions. We have to make sure that people stand up and say, no, we're not going to take this anymore.
Ward?
And that's part of the purpose, in my view.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was saying before, is because the way that the media has turned to, I mean, with CNN, for example, just constantly, Russia, until they, finally had to step back and say, okay, Russia didn't exist. Now it's racist. And it's, if it was like legit reporting and there was something that was done that was racist, I get that. But just to come up and just belittle the president of the United States constantly for nothing but political gain is just sad.
No matter what he does, and the thing about it is that he can do the same thing that Obama did, 6 or 8 years ago, and it's a completely different view put on it. I mean, and God help Trump if he ever bugged a reporter the way Obama was bugging people. And it all depends upon you. What if, I got a good one for you guys, what if Trump had been involved with selling 20% of our uranium to Russian interests?
Oh, Lord.
$130 million, getting $130 million in the Trump Foundation.
That's enough. That's enough to indict the media right there. I mean, sure. That's something, and we're running out of time here, John, but I just want to know, you said that, we shouldn't hold individual reporters accountable, and I agree 100% with that. But when or if is it possible for these media executives to be held to account? Because think about what they're doing, man. I mean, I remember going back to the day before Imam Obama was inaugurated. And I remember two big names, and I can't remember. I think it was, it was like Tom Brokaw and maybe Charlie Rose. I can't remember the two. They're both obscure now. But they said, on foreign policy, we don't really know where Barack Obama will go. And I remember hearing that, and I remember thinking, what? We just went through this entire campaign, and you're now saying that? You're fired.
Well, there you are. And you could have known. And, of course, everybody put their hands off. We're not going to get into this Reverend Wright stuff.
Right.
I don't care about the racial part of Reverend
Me
Wright.
either.
What I care about from him is his view that America is to blame for everything. And this is a fellow that's sitting in a pew cheering Reverend Wright when he's talking about goddamn America,
my God.
and all that stuff. And we should have known. If they reported correctly, we should have known that.
Well, we did know. We did know here.
We did know. I mean,
at that time,
common sense people knew. Yeah,
it wasn't Cold War radio then. It was Steel City Resistance. But Mr. John O'Connor, please tell people how they can get your book and anything else that's pertinent. Thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thanks, Hutch. The book is called Postgate: How the Washington Post Betrayed Deep Throat, Covered Up Watergate, and Began Today's Partisan Advocacy Journalism. We have a site, postgatebook.com. Amazon has a web page for it, Barnes & Noble, all of them, and it would really be good, and I'm encouraging people to pre-order, because the more we get this down and the general public understands what happened in Watergate, it's very easy then to say we're not going to let this stand. This is the pattern. This is the template that's been laid out. Let's not let it happen again. Let's make sure it doesn't.
Well, I'll tell you, we have a lot of readers that are listening to you right now, so you'll probably get a little bit of a boost on the book sales, pre-orders. I hope so. But thanks for coming on the show, sir. I hope you come back again.
Well,
absolutely.
Hutch, this has been great. Ward, been great. Please have me back on, and we'll talk about it some more after the book comes out.
Absolutely.
I'd love to talk to you guys. You really know what you're talking about, so it's been fun here tonight.
Well, thank you. We're flattered, and we try to do our homework. Mr. John O'Connor, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming on the show.
Okay, see you guys.
Take it easy.
All right, another great interview.
Absolutely.
Cold War Radio.